Hello, Dr. Vicki Peterson here. I want to speak with you today about testing your doctor. If you suspect you are gluten intolerant or you already know that you have celiac disease or gluten sensitivity, I hear from a lot of people who go to clinicians and get advice that doesn't quite align with a lot of the things they're reading, hearing from me, etc. And the truth of the matter is there are a lot of gastroenterologists who are specialists in the area of the GI tract. There are a lot of general clinicians who are not up to speed on the latest research in the area of gluten intolerance. We're not going to make them wrong or right for that. They just aren't. But I want to make sure that you're getting good advice. So I'm going to write a blog about this, and it's going to go into a lot more detail. But for those of you who don't like to read, I think we should have a little checklist that we look at before going to a doctor or speaking with a doctor, so you know if you're in the right place, if you know you can trust the advice you're getting. So some of the basics. If you are suspicious about gluten intolerance and you want to get tested for celiac disease, of course I'd love it if you could be tested for gluten sensitivity and celiac disease, because if all you get is a celiac test, then you could be missing the fact you're still gluten sensitive. But for the majority of clinicians, they don't utilize the test for gluten sensitivity. So let's just stick with celiac right for the moment. So say you go to your doctor and you say, you know, I'm suspicious about this. I've taken some time away from gluten. I felt better. Now I've reintroduced it. I feel worse. I really want to test, okay? So of course you wouldn't ask for a blood test if you had been off gluten and have stayed off gluten, okay? And you never want to reintroduce gluten in order to take a test. That's dangerous. But if you're currently eating it and you're suspicious, maybe because celiac disease is in your family, whatever reason, you go to a doctor and say, I want to be tested. If that doctor says you couldn't possibly have celiac disease because you have no digestive complaints, that's a doctor who doesn't understand this disease. If the doctor says you're not underweight or you're overweight and therefore there's no reason to check you because you couldn't have celiac disease, that doctor is misinformed. You need to go elsewhere. If the doctor says, I can run a blood test, but the gold standard, the only way we're really going to know if you have celiac disease is to do an intestinal biopsy, once again, that doctor is misinformed. So none of these are true statements. So that's a good kind of initial foray into celiac disease and testing your doctor. If you feel better on a gluten-free diet and your doctor says, you know, that's unlikely based on what I know about you, that's once again misinformed, because what's happening is that doctors know the classic celiac disease description, which is underweight, typically diarrhea, abdominal pain, you see, seriously ill, and it's very digestive, pretty much solely digestive in nature. They're a little stuck in that classic description. So if you went to a doctor with neurological symptoms, maybe you were depressed or you had migraines or you had ataxia, meaning unstable gait, and if you went to a doctor and said, I want to be tested for celiac disease, no, I don't have any digestive complaints, but I do have these symptoms. Once again, if the doctor said there's no reason to test you then because you have no digestive complaints, once again, they're misinformed. So I want to make sure that when you're getting advice, you're getting good advice, because what's happening is I'm hearing from people from all over the world who have been told erroneous things. They've been off gluten, not eating any gluten, and been given a blood test and told they're fine. The doctor never even asked if they were eating gluten or not. They've been given a blood test, had a positive result, then had a follow-up biopsy, and because the biopsy was negative, we're told they were fine. That's completely wrong also. It's hard enough to get a positive test without then throwing it out the window, because the test that doesn't necessarily have to be positive, the biopsy is negative. In other words, you can absolutely have a negative intestinal biopsy and have celiac disease. None of what I'm saying is not backed up by a lot of research. So none of this is opinion. Let me make that perfectly clear. So I just want to make sure, because the facts of the matter are we only diagnose 5% of the population suffering from celiac disease. The reason we miss 95% of those that are suffering is that we don't know what to look for, we don't know how to test them, and we don't know how to give them the proper advice. So many people are suffering. Their lives are being shortened. They're suffering from autoimmune diseases and so many other problems that doctors have literally no idea that are caused by gluten. So please take this to heart. Don't be led astray. Do realize that the gluten sensitivity test, it's a newer test. The whole research into the field of gluten sensitivity is really quite new. So the fact that there's no accepted lab test, it's just because it takes time. I wrote our book, The Gluten Effect, almost 3 years ago now, and it was mostly on gluten sensitivity. I wrote it at a time where nobody agreed there was such a thing. Now, absolutely, it's been established there's such a thing as gluten sensitivity, and there are some tests out there. I like them. I get good results from them. But the medical community moves slowly, and they haven't given their seal of approval on these tests yet. Doesn't mean they don't exist, and it doesn't mean they don't give good evidence. And also remember, if you're having trouble getting tested, or maybe you get a celiac test and it's negative, you can always do what I consider a gold standard, which is 30 days off of gluten, and see how you feel. That is an extremely valid test. You don't need a piece of paper to prove to you that you are gluten sensitive. And one last point is that I've also been hearing from people recently who got a positive test, but it was just over the threshold of being positive. So let's say the test result had to be above 10 to be positive, and the person who wrote to me recently had 12 as her test result. She said, well, since it's low positive, then maybe I'm okay, I can cheat a little, and it's no. These tests are insensitive in and of themselves, meaning that they miss a lot of people who are positive. So as soon as you are positive, if the test has to be above 10 and you are 11, that's it. It's positive. There's no such thing as a little positive, all right? So I hope I have generated some questions, and please come back to me with them. I'm more than happy to answer them. I really want to clear up a lot of the confusion that's out there with getting a diagnosis and going to a doctor who really understands this area. So I'm always here for you. Please let me know how I can help. And in the meantime, I wish you very good health.